Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and it's time to pull your head out the sand and get with the program because there's a lot to talk about with Westworld. Season 4 has just hit the midpoint with its 4th episode flipping everything on its head, and throughout this video we're going to be breaking down the twist, talking about the Easter eggs in it, and all the hidden details that you might have missed. This is the super spoiler event of the year, so if you haven't checked it out, then check out now. Now I want to get straight into it, and up top I think we should discuss the big twist at the end of the entry. Come the closing few scenes, it's revealed that Caleb's entire story is just a fidelity test carried out by Hale on a copy of Caleb in the future. She has already won and is simply putting him through the motions to see if she can finally establish a baseline. The episode is titled Generation Loss, and this carries a couple of meanings with it. The first one that pops up is the phrase itself, which has several ties to photocopying and computer technology. Generation Loss refers to the loss in quality between subsequent copies of the same thing. For example, if you photocopy something, though it takes the majority of the data from the original piece, there are certain aspects of it that aren't duplicated. If you photocopy this photocopy, it's then missing those pieces, and the next piece has its own losses, which are then passed on to the next one. Once you copy something enough times, it eventually loses so much that it's a fraction of its former self, which has ties to the Temperance Park, Caleb, and just humanity in general, who we see are subservient come the end of the entry. Everyone is now just on a loop, setting up Christina with dates, and watching the Morbi of the Morblennium, aka Morbius. Now there's also the generation loss, meaning that Caleb has lost a generation, so yeah, admit it, you wouldn't have spotted that without me, would you chump?
See you, chump.
Anyway, though it initially seems complicated, this reveal at the end actually simplifies the show quite a bit. In the past we've had timelines that look like a Jackson Pollock painting, but this reveal tells us that the majority of the show is all happening at the same time. Whilst Caleb's fidelity test is going on, we have Bernard meeting up with his daughter Frankie, and probably Christina off in the New York storyline. We'll talk about how this could be happening at a different time due to what Maya says, but most of Caleb and Maeve's storyline can be put down to just being flashbacks in the test. The only real parts of the season that are happening in the past are the William moments at the dam, the golf course, and when Hale was interacting with the real one in the machine. Now this could also be the present, and it makes me think that they can put humans into stasis and preserve them, which I believe will mean that we'll get the Man in Black popping up in the future, the present day storyline. Now the first hint that this is a montage of Caleb's life comes with us opening on the mission to the lighthouse that both he and Maeve carried out. The prototype Rehoboam was built by the Seracs, and it was shown to us early on in Season 3 after we met the final one at Insight. A vision of this first appeared in Maeve's vision in Episode 1, but we get it expanded on much more here. Now Rehoboam was very much seen as something that controlled free will. This machine used a complex algorithm to plot out a course for humanity based on the data that was obtained at Westworld. It put people into specific roles, recommended that certain ones shouldn't have children, and overall it stopped them from advancing so that its vision of the future could come to fruition. It was seen as something that controlled free will, and in many ways, people became stuck in loops just living out their daily lives, unable to change or take a different course. However, people did still have free will in many ways, as they were able to act against this and break free of the system, which was demonstrated in Caleb. This idea of free will is also questioned in the parasites that Hale develops. However, whereas people could break free in the case of Rehoboam, judging by what we see in New York at the end, this is completely stripped from everyone. They also have to follow the commands given by the tower, and everyone is under Hale's complete control. Now during the mission to Rehoboam, Maeve messes up one of the security cameras as a distraction, and she did something similar at the senator's house in Episode 2. They plant the explosives and detonate them, and manage to just make it out, but Caleb is shot outside. Early on in our breakdowns, we did question whether this would be his actual death, and it was a nice fake out for the real one that's to come later on. This very much foreshadows his quote-unquote death at the end of the episode, and really nice job guys. Now during this moment, Maeve shows Caleb what freedom is by hacking into his implant. We see her walking through the fields with her daughter, wearing the white dress that she had on in her original loop in the park. There's also the tree there that was shown last week, which ended up burning as Bernard came across it. It's clearly hitting at Maeve's endgame, and she wants nothing more than to get back with her daughter. Now Caleb is saved by Maeve, but we'll talk about how this works into the story later on in the video. Now we cut from this fantasy to Hale waking him up. This is very much how most of the fidelity tests began, and in the case of James Delos, it was very much like he woke up and just got ready. Hale also appears wearing black in this scene, similar to how William did when he was carrying out the fidelity test himself. I also love the subtle moment here where she predicts the end of Caleb's question.
My family
Kill them? No, they're still somewhere out there alive.
This is a great little detail, as we learn with James Delos that William had an entire conversation that they'd played through several times. We did theorize earlier in the season that she had perfected this, and that the William host was actually a direct copy of the real one. Though we still don't have it confirmed, I do think it's the case because he had his childhood memories, and he also has the vendetta against Maeve, which he wouldn't have if he was just impersonating him. Anyway, moving on from that, as I'm probably doing your head in with it, we discover Hale's plan for the park. The entire thing was set up as a way to create carriers for the parasite, which would then garden in the world and infect people. There's lots of COVID allusions here, such as the term super spreader, and also the one first wave being used. Now Hale also explains why she brought him back and is running through the fidelity test.
Maeve and Dolores were always so fond of you, I'm inclined to keep you around. See what all the fuss is about.
There's also a nice little bit of set design here too, as we can see that the light fittings used also resemble the tower, which was carried into the street light design in New York. Now, it's theory time. Pretty much everything is a theory, but that's what we do at the channel. I'm starting to think that these themselves are mini towers, like what we see on the lampposts and building towards the end, and having these throughout the entire city would mean that Hale has complete control over everyone. When fighting against William, Maeve ends up hacking into the system, and she then turns up the vibrations to critical level, which not only works against the hosts, but it also destroys all the glass on the floor. Maeve also mutes the sound for herself, and she becomes unaffected by it. Now we're dropping off finale predictions in already, but I kinda have the feeling that Maeve might end up destroying the tower this way. If she can hack into the giant structure and overpower it, it would potentially destroy all the hosts. Caleb doesn't seem anywhere near as affected as they are, and therefore the humans might be absolutely fine. Now Maeve is also described as a weapon by Bernard, and due to them digging her up later on, it's clear that she's a crucial part of taking down Hale. Therefore I think this scene is showing she will be the key to destroying the tower, due to her control of electronics. Also, if this did happen, yeah, we get a cool shot of all the glass on the skyscrapers exploding, which I just think would be great. Anyway, that's the end of theory time. Still gonna be doing non-stop theories in the video. I just wanted a dedicated section for this bit time. Now after Maeve reunites with Hale, she brings up Wyatt, which was the evil and homicidal maniac side of Dolores that Hale has clearly gone beyond. We get a shot of the flies, and I love how their meaning has mutated throughout the series. Initially they were used symbolically on the host to show them gaining a higher form of functioning, whereas here they symbolize the downfall of humanity whilst the hosts grow even more. Cut to Christina waking up, which again is iconography that has been used on both her and Dolores throughout the whole series. We see her painting Vanishing Point has been covered up, and this painting was something that she used to create in the park as part of her loop. However, she shows here that she's breaking out of it in this new world by scribbling the tower across the center of it. This being placed over the painting of the Manhattan streets, of course, metaphorically showcases that the tower also controls New York. Now Maya also talks about a nightmare involving being swarmed by flies on a family picnic when she was younger. This very much comes across like it's a repressed memory of when Hale let the parasites free. Because this nightmare comes from when she was younger, it seems to plant this as being roughly at the same time that the stories involving Bernard and Caleb are also happening. We also get this line,
"Does it look like anything to you?"
which is of course calling back to the times that it was said by the hosts when there was something that they weren't meant to see.
Doesn't look like anything to me.
Doesn't look like anything to me.
Now this is somewhat mirrored in Maya, who doesn't even acknowledge the tower. Even at the end of the scene, she tries to look at it, but at the last second she looks away, almost like she's scared of seeing the truth. The drawing of the tower also looks very similar to the one by the homeless man from the first two episodes. My guess is that, much in the same way that Rehoboam put people on loops, that all of the citizens of New York are on one too. The man is probably homeless because either he's immune to the parasites or he didn't get infected. This would mean that he wouldn't be able to gel with the other humans on their own loops, and therefore he couldn't fit into society. Makes you wonder where Christina fits into it all too, and I think that she is right in the loops of the people, which is why Peter went to her in the first episode. In episode 2 she discovered a wing named after him in Hope Hospital that showed he'd been dead for a number of years. My guess is that this loop was written a long time ago and then given to him, which led to the original one's death. This loop was then picked up by Hale and reused on a different human, much in the same way that the park would replace hosts when one went faulty, like how Clementine did. I do think that Christina is a host and that she'll be revealed to be a copy of Dolores, which Hale would have access to due to her being a copy too. She later talks about how she can just make another man in black, so that would be the same thing here, I'd imagine. Anyway, that's the end of theory. Oh, sake, I've already done it. I know. Out with Bernard, we hear the talk of outliers.
That was before we found another outlier. We gotta extract her fast before she's hunted down. We can't waste time on some misguided treasure hunt.
This was terminology used in the third season to discuss people who didn't fit into Rehoboam's plan. They were ostracized and sent for reprogramming, which we saw through the story of Caleb. We also don't know who this outlier is, but I can imagine it's likely Christina due to her unearthing what's really going on. Outliers were people who were unpredictable that broke free of their loops, and Caleb was a human one, whilst Dolores was a host one. I'm guessing the term here means people that weren't affected by the parasite, and thus they've had to band together as rebels in order to try and save the rest of the world. Lots of similarities to the Matrix, and we know due to the two hosts in the parking lot last week that Hale is hunting them down. There's also a drone scanning the area, and we hear Frankie's nickname is C. Nice way of them hiding the twist. I'm guessing that C stands for now stands for chump or Caleb probably, which in Hebrew means faithful, brave and bold. Bernard also hints that Stubbs is going to be useful to the rebels that he's taken with.
Do I have to go with him?
For safety.
At least I'll be safe.
I didn't mean yours.
Out in the desert, we get a really cool drone scene where they use camouflage to blend in with the sand, and I got a lot of Two Towers vibes from this. Bernard wanders out into it, and he's saved by Frankie at the last second. Now this was in order to see if a beetle was there, which actually appeared in his vision last week. This also appeared alongside Temperance, looking dusty and run down, which I'm guessing is what the park looks like now due to it being abandoned. Jump back to Temperance and Caleb's flashback, and we see a copper holding up Hector's wanted poster. We met this park's version of Hector last week, and Maeve of course had somewhat of a relationship with the one in Westworld. The three attempt to make a daring escape from the park, and we see how the parasites have infected people within Temperance itself. Keeping up with the Matrix analogy, this very much turns them into agents that begin to hunt the pair as they escort Hale out. Caleb says that they just became public enemy number one, a term that originated from the 1930s when it was coined by the FBI hunting gangsters in settings like this. Knowing the loops off by heart, Maeve is able to navigate away for them to a bootlegger vehicle which is stocked up with moonshine. During the 1920s Prohibition era, America banned the manufacture and sale of alcohol, and thus black market dealer and gangsters had to create homebrewed stuff like moonshine, which they ran as bootleggers. Now we slowly see the control start to seep into Caleb's mind as he picks up one of the guns and points it towards Maeve. She's saved by someone stabbing him, and this injury is somewhat similar to the one he sustained at the start, which allows them to talk about what happened after the lighthouse mission. Elsewhere, Christina is out on another date, and in a callback to Dolores's and Teddy's loop, lipstick ends up getting dropped, which he picks up. Obviously, it's a mirror in the can. Obviously, you don't need me to explain that to you. In fact, you probably know more than me when it comes down to it. Funnily enough, loads of people last week left comments predicting that Frankie was the woman Bernard and Stubbs met, and it made me look like a right chump. However, I still make the big bucks from doing these mediocre videos on the show, so who's the real chump here? You are.
See you, chump.
Anyway, on the date, Teddy talks about the mundanity of life. I'm sorry, guys, I love yous. Now on the date, Teddy talks about the mundanity of life and how he used to live day to day.
Rinse and repeat. Like a train circling the smallest track.
During Westworld Season 1, Teddy began his loop by riding into town on the train, but this conversation shows that he's broken out of it. He also mentions that he was a bounty hunter with a heart of gold, confirming that he indeed had the same role that he did in the park. Now this could be a case of him being the exact same version as how he was in Westworld, or potentially it could be referring to the Grand Theft Auto-esque bounties that Caleb used to carry out in Season 3, leaning more towards the park in all honesty, and that would make sense why he's out there trying to save Dolores. Now Caleb was taken to hospital by Maeve, and sitting by his bedside, she saw the finality of life. Guess she forgot about Lee Sizemore, eh? But she saw the love that Caleb and his wife had and decided to set him free. She wanted him to actually have happiness and something to fight for instead of just fighting. She let him be free of the war and fled into the wilderness, allowing him to have a daughter in life. One day she reached out through the grid to find him, and this is what overcharged the radio at her home. I was kinda hoping that the radio at her cabin would be linked to the one with Frankie, but alas, turns out it was not all connected. Now through doing this, Hale found Caleb's family, and this is why she copied his daughter. They then make it to the outskirts of the park, which we see is set up to be demolished as part of the expansion program. At this point, the Man in Black arrives once more, leading to a shootout with William and Maeve. There's more misses than the jokes in this video, and in the observation room, Caleb ties up Hale as the pair duke it out. At this point, the tower is sounded off, and Hale orders Caleb to shoot Maeve. However, he overpowers this programming, which could be another reason why she wants to study him. If she can figure out how he disobeyed her, she can potentially control the outliers. Caleb very much hints that he did this because he has something worth fighting for, aka his family, who he heard from his team are still alive. After she's stabbed by William, Maeve ends up arming the explosives, and she sacrifices herself to take out William. Now it's at this point that we see the truth of the matter with Hale very much appearing like she's running the fidelity test. Going through his memories, it's revealed that he died, and we also get this nice bit of editing that shows Frankie is his daughter before the final reveal.
Frankie will not grow up in a world where she is controlled by you.
Caleb is then killed by Hale's men, who arrive in the security uniforms carrying the P90s. Cheers everyone who corrected the gun mistake on the last video. You guys are the real heroes. Now, elsewhere, Bernard starts to dig, and we discover Frankie is in fact looking for her father. His body was recovered early, and I know I dropped these videos early, so I can't really see what the fan theories are before making them, but I can imagine that there will be people who think he's actually still alive. If the stasis theory about William was right before, then he could have been captured by Hale, healed, and then put on ice. However, I don't think that's the case, as Hale refers to him as the 278th version of Caleb. Still though, the original could be locked up somewhere like William. As we know, you don't have to kill someone in order to copy them. I do still doubt he's alive though, but I thought I'd just explore that in case it's something people are wondering. Now we learn that Hale found that the older a person was, the more difficult that their mind was to alter with the parasite. However, infecting children allowed them to grow in symbiosis with the parasite, and within a generation, Hale had control. Big head moment, and we cut to Caleb coming to, whilst Bernard brings Maeve's head out the sand. Over the top of this is the demolition sign, which we saw when she and Caleb entered the area. Might be a reach, but Maeve being brought out reminded me a lot of her being built by Serac in the real world during Season 3. Caleb ends up fleeing into New York in an almost Captain America-esque man-out-of-time scene in which he escaped S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters and fled into the street. As he exits the lobby, we see that he passes the Olympiad sign, which you might remember us pointing out in the first episode, had a lot of similarities to the Delos logo. Leaving the building, we can see that this is actually the same one that Christina went to work at in the first episode, potentially showing how their paths might cross. We did have theories that this might indeed be its own park, but I feel this kinda negates all that. However, there was that weird conversation in episode 1, in which people talked about it being one of the group's first time, so f*** knows really.
This place is fucking wild. Can you believe this is your first time? Come on.
Going a bit off the deep end with what we know now, I'm kind of wondering whether this might be a park for the hosts for them to come and basically have their own Westworld with humanity. I think that would be a super creative twist, but I don't know if they've got enough time to flesh that out, but just kind of spitballing going off what those three guys said back in episode 1 that we haven't stopped thinking about. Another weird thing is that there's no kids in this New York, which might have some significance with Hale not allowing people to breed. Way back in Season 3 when we got the simulation by Rehoboam, it said total population collapse within 23 years, which might have come true if Hale has actually stopped people having kids. Also, this idea of it being a new park is seen when Caleb shoulder barges someone, which was something that always happened whenever people entered one. It popped up in Westworld for Teddy and William, and in Temperance when Caleb got off the train. The entire city is then frozen like the program being paused in the Matrix, and it shows that Hale has complete control over absolutely everything. She's won, big W, and I kinda hope that Caleb ends up pairing up with Christina in order to take this all down. If our theory about Maeve being used as a weapon to destroy the tower is true, then this could be how Frankie and Bernard are brought in, and it's such a good ending with so many possibilities. This could honestly have been the end of the season, it's that big of a cliffhanger, and I can't wait to see what happens next week. I genuinely think this was one of the best Westworld episodes ever, and it had one of the biggest oh shit moments in the show for me. It's up there with realizing Bernard was a host, and yeah, a really good twist to show that Hale has already won, and Caleb is just going through a fidelity test. Brilliant, and I'd of course love to hear your thoughts, so make sure you comment below and let me know. I know some of you are going to be like, it sucks, Paul, what the hell are you talking about? But I'd love to hear your opinions, so make sure you drop them below. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of last week or The Boys, which is linked on screen right now. We've got lots of things to talk about. Definitely stick around on the channel and make sure you subscribe and like the video if you had fun. Without the way, thanks for sitting through it. I've been Paul, I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.